On this edition of Gameball NFL Endzone, we're going to recap the AFC North and the NFC North and their draft picks from this past NFL draft, rounds 1 through 7. It's been a busy offseason thus far, and it's only going towards the end of May, so there's still plenty of time for a lot of big moves. And, of course, where else to recap all of your favorite teams but right here, Gameball NFL Endzone, and it kicks off now. What's happening, everyone? Welcome to Gameball NFL Endzone, where the football season never ends. I'm Marcus Young Genius Jenkins.
It's your boy, Michael Riley.
I'm Luke Hartnett.
Yes, sir. And we're going to break down the AFC North first and what they did in the NFL draft, starting with the Cincinnati Bengals, and we'll break down their selections, starting with the 11th overall pick, and that was Jonah Williams, offensive tackle out of the Alabama University. Number 52, Drew Sample, a tight end out of Washington. Jermaine Pratt, linebacker out of NC State, followed by a teammate of his in college at the same university, Ryan Finley. They select at the quarterback position, Rennell Wren, defensive tackle out of Arizona State, and Michael Jordan. Of course, not that Michael Jordan, of course, all y'all know that, but Michael Jordan, offensive guard from Ohio State. Travion Williams, running back out of Texas A&M. Deshaun Davis, linebacker out of Auburn. Rodney Anderson, running back out of Oklahoma. And Jordan Brown, cornerback out of South Dakota State. Mike, I want to start with you. You gave the Cincinnati Bengals an A-. Why did you give them that grade?
Well, they could have gone a lot of ways. They need a lot of needs here and there, but the most important need that they need was offensive line, because you see how last year Andy Dalton couldn't save his life from that offensive line protection. It was horrible. He was getting beat up, and there was some most injury at that spot, and I felt like they had to address the offensive tackle, and that's exactly what they did. They could kick him out to the right, and he'll play out there. He's versatile. He can play other line position, but what he told this coach, he's like, I'm an offensive tackle, and I'll show you. Despite the size here and there and all that, but I think that's overrated. As long as you work at it, put your heart into it, you could be a dominant player, and that's what he was. And you could play him on the left side. He's good, but he's more preferred as a right tackle. That's why I think the Cincinnati Bengals will kick him off at. And you have a new head coach that was under Sean McVay as an assistant on the offensive side, so that kind of helps out a little bit. And that's where you want to make your bread and butter, your statement at early as a head coach. Address the offensive position need. Then you get a good tight end in the second round. Then you fix your defense up here and there, and hopefully everybody can stay healthy. But the number one critical aspect of being successful offensively is protect your quarterback, Andy Dalton, because the last few years he's been injured without a good offensive lineman, as we know it. So if you get a good offensive line, protect them and get that running game going, Joe Mixon and wide receiver A.J. Green going the passing game, as well as Tyler Eifert, who's been suffering with injuries the last 3 years. If they can stay healthy, there'll be a nice offense in that division.
All right, I'm going to pass this one on to Luke. You gave them a solid A. Why'd you give them an A?
You look at everyone who they picked in basically those top 3 or 4 rounds, they are going to play right away. Mike pretty much nailed it when he said they got lots of needs, and that's why. So not only do they get guys that that could fill those needs, they got guys that can play and make an impact right away. I don't know if we'll see it in the record. Only time will tell on that. But I mean, there's not a lot of wait and see guys. They're going to get there. They're going to get tested early and often. And I really like to pick up a Travion Williams. I actually had him as a first rounder to the Rams in my mock draft. So I obviously have a very high opinion of this guy. I keep on going back to that game he had against Tennessee as a sophomore, where he just, I believe the game went overtime. There's highlights all over the place. He just kind of ran wild against them that day. And, you fast forward 2 years later to an NC State in the bowl game. He was, in my opinion, the best player to fill that game as well. So Mike mentioned Joe Mixon. I think Travion Williams and Joe Mixon could be one of the more dynamic running back duos there is.
So it looks like, this would be safe to say, in a lot of ways, this is like in a way, kind of like a rebuilding process. Of course, you finally get rid of Marvin Lewis, and you have a new coaching staff coming in. You're drafting a lot of young talent. Would you guys agree with that?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a new beginning, and some cleansing need to happen with that team, and they need to get rid of a lot of players, especially defensive side with Fontes Burfict with his history getting penalized and getting kicked out of games. So you want to refresh, restart, and I said to start at is the offensive side, and that's what they did in the draft.
They kind of need to, in my opinion, do something similar to what Gruden did with the Raiders. Like Mike pretty much touched on it right there a moment ago. They need to rebuild the culture, and I wouldn't be surprised if they, throughout the rest of the offseason, maybe actually into, as the season progresses, maybe make some trades, get some more draft picks.
All right, so a new era definitely starting in Cincinnati with the Bengals. A lot of solid picks. Once again, Mike A- and Luke with an A for the Bengals. We're going to move forward to the Baltimore Ravens. Of course, we knew a lot of offseason moves. Of course, Joey Flacco no longer the man at the helm as a quarterback with the Ravens. So a lot of new things happening there. We're going to start with their draft picks. They had the highest was in the first round, and that was 25th overall with Marquise Brown, who's a wide receiver out of Oklahoma, followed by Jalen Ferguson, offensive linebacker out of Louisiana Tech. Outside linebacker out of Louisiana Tech. Miles Boykin, wide receiver out of Notre Dame. Of course, we know about the year that Notre Dame had during this past football season. Justice Hill, running back out of Oklahoma State. Ben Powers, offensive guard out of Oklahoma. Iman Marshall, cornerback out of USC. Dalen Mack, defensive tackle of Texas A&M. And Tracy McSorley, who we all know is also an outstanding college football player for Penn State, going in the 6th round. Luke, we're going to kick it over to you this time. You gave the Ravens an A.
Yeah, a little foreshadowing here. I think the entire AFC North drafted very well this particular past draft. Got all of them graded out pretty well, actually. But, they got all, you mentioned Hollywood Brown out of Hollywood, Florida, hence the nickname. He was a great pickup there. One could argue that maybe could have gone DK Metcalf at that point instead, so Seattle was able to luck out in the second round to pick him up. I like the running back out of Oklahoma named Justice Hill. Justice Hill, thank you. Yes,
Oklahoma State.
Oklahoma State. Another great pickup for him right there as well. And the receiver out of Notre Dame is going to make an impact too. So but I just like with They're obviously offensively. They're obviously very confident in their offensive line, and then you mentioned Joe Flacco now with the Broncos. So we'll see. One thing about Joe Flacco, I thought he handled the Lamar Jackson, situation very well. Every time Lamar Jackson was on the sideline, he was right there in his ear, right there in the playbook. Like, he couldn't have helped him out anymore. Speaking of Lamar Jackson, he's got a lot of good skill position guys right there. So the fact that Baltimore went skill position guys early and often lets you know that they're very, very secure and confident. This was a playoff team from a year ago, lost to the Chargers, the wild card weekend. But they won the AFC North. They made the playoffs. They got this now second-year quarterback in Lamar Jackson. He's got great ability, great running ability, great mobility, I should say. And but some of these receivers are going to be able to help him out immensely, though.
Absolutely. Mike, I'm going to pass this on to you. You also gave them an A. Why did you also follow through with an A?
Well, I felt like they got the best receiver in the draft with Marquise Goodwin. A lot of teams passed up on him. I was shocked that the Green Bay Packers passed on him, and we'll get to that in a moment. But Marquise Goodwin with Lamar Jackson says it all. He is a pure route runner receiver, and he had to go through a lot just to make it to this point. He wasn't highly recruited in high school. He had to go to JUCO. He was a number 1 receiver, but he was still highly recruited, so he went to Oklahoma. During his tenure at Oklahoma, he had a chip on his shoulder where I could play as well, just because of his height and his weight. But guess who's he related to? Antonio Brown. That's his cousin. Look what the size of Antonio Brown. They said the exact same thing about him. And how many thousands of yard season he had? About 6 out of 7. So it comes to show you that it doesn't matter the size and all that stuff. It just matters the willpower. Can you do it? And I feel like he could do it with this offense and give him that. That is a security blanket for him. He could run down the field. He gets not run down the field, but stretch down the field where his route running ability is quickness. You could throw a screen pass to him, he'll take it a distance. As well as the other draft pick, I feel like they got to steal that Ferguson kid out of Louisiana Tech. When I watch him play, he kind of reminds me of Terrell Suggs in a way, but not as close to Terrell Suggs,
right.
But he gets there, he gets his hand in the dirt, and he can stand up in the pass game as well. And I love the way he uses his hands to get to the quarterback. And boy, can another steal. So they're set at the offensive side. It's just more surrounding with Lamar Jackson weapons. And you also in the offseason had a huge signing where Earl Thomas for the Seahawks come over to their defense. Yeah, they lost their linebacker to the Jets, but I feel like they'll dress the safety more than the linebacker, and they can develop players. But overall, Baltimore nailed it with an A.
Kind of off topic, but you mentioned the name. How weird is it going to be seeing Terrell Suggs with the Cardinals this year?
Yeah.
That's
a really good question.
That's like Jordan with the Wizards.
Right.
There's going to be something that's never right about that photo.
Yeah.
Right.
I say, yeah, he was part of the Ravens. Him and Reed and Ray Lewis. That was, man, that defense was, yeah. I actually, speaking of which, do you think the Ravens will ever have a defense anything close to what was once there that brought you multiple Super Bowls?
No.
I don't think NFL rules will allow it. It's too. I mean, the rule. If it was still, late '90s, turn of the century or so. I mean, I think it'd be almost a no-brainer that they'd be able to, just because I think the defensive talent, I think is actually better coming out of college than it was, 20 years ago. But they got it so offensive slanted for everything now. I don't know that we'll ever see that again.
All right, A's across the board from both Mike and Luke for the Baltimore Ravens with their draft picks. We're going to move forward to the Cleveland Browns. Of course, we already know all the big offseason moves that they've made thus far, including Odell Beckham Jr., a new addition to the Browns, a lot of expectations. Of course, they also have Kareem Hunt, formerly the Kansas City Chiefs. He'll be active after the first half of the season, pretty much. But they have a lot of offensive talent, a lot of hype is going into this as far as the Browns, or excuse me, not the Rams, but the Browns eventually being Super Bowl contenders. We're going to talk about their draft picks to see what they're also doing to add on to their already stellar offseason. We're going to start with their 46th overall draft pick, and that is Greedy Williams, the cornerback out of LSU. Sion Tadataki, linebacker out of BYU. Seldrick Redwine, safety out of Miami. Mack Wilson, linebacker out of Alabama. Austin Siebert, kicker out of Oklahoma. Drew Forbes, offensive guard out of Southeast Missouri. And Donnie Lewis, quarterback out of Tulane. Mike, I'm going to start with you first. You gave them kind of a mid-grade. You gave them a C. Why did you give them a C?
Well, it's probably just because they didn't have hardly any top-tier picks in the draft because they traded for Odell Beckham. I won't count that against them, but it's just the Greedy Williams. I mean, he's a talented player, but his thing is, can he tackle in space? And some of the film that we saw, he didn't really tackle in space at all. He didn't shoot the gap, whatever. And a lot of people was like, well, this and this and that. But nowadays, you have to play that hybrid corner. You have to be physical to where you have to make plays against the run as well as the pass. He's more plays against the pass than against the run and all this other stuff. A lot of people was like, well, it's not a corner's job to do it. Well, actually, it is, because they kind of depend on you to where if he breaks the tackle, then all of a sudden he's gone for a long game, whatever. Right. So, and the linebacker, I'm not really sold on the BYU. I'm more sold on the Mack Wilson, Alabama linebacker, than BYU. Maybe just I haven't watched enough tape on him. Overall, I just gave him a C, and everything looks good on paper, but we'll have to see how this season plays out, because the Baltimore Ravens are still the AFC North champs, and you can't just up and clown the Cleveland Browns just yet. Right. Just tone it down, everybody. Pump the brakes.
All All right, Luke, we're going to kick this to you. You gave them a slightly higher grade. You gave them a B. Why'd you give them a higher grade?
I gave them a B just because I like their draft for the exact opposite reason of what I like, why I like the Bengals. They got a lot of guys who, different situations. They got some guys who can sit and wait, can make an impact 2, 3, 4 years from now. And in order to really have a good draft class, at least when everything's 2020, hindsight 2020. You really just need about maybe 1 or 2 guys from a draft class to really be a successful pro to get a higher grade in retrospect. A case in point, name one other draft pick from the 2017 draft the Chiefs made not named Pat Mahomes. Okay, now what grade are we going to give the Chiefs for the 2017 draft? We're going to give them an A, right?
Right.
Now, that's a little different in this situation because it's a defensive player. If Greedy wins the second round or whatever else. But if Greedy can step up and just be relevant, just be serviceable, just don't be not bad, then it's a successful draft for him. Because Mike touched on earlier with a lot of the offseason moves that they made this year, picking up Odell Beckham amongst others. I do think losing the kid Peppers on defensively could come back to maybe be something they regret. But they did what they had to do to get OBJ. But we'll see. What I'm trying to make, they got the one kid Greedy Williams. I am sold on Greedy. I think he's going to be, he's not going to probably ever be first team All Pro. He doesn't have to be. Be second team, be third team. That'll be good enough.
I know, but I kind of like Ward because Ward established himself as that he can do it all. Because you already saw film from last year when he entered the draft from the Ohio State to where he made that vicious hit on that running back and catching that pass play, and he's well to play on the ball. If you could just have some of that in your game, then my grade would be different. So that's the reason why I gave him the grade I gave him.
All right, the Cleveland Browns definitely are going to have a lot of hype and a lot of pressure, I would imagine, just going into the season. Of course, they're not going to be at full strength, of course, with, once again, Kareem Hunt not being available until the halfway point of the season. But you still have guys like Odell Beckham Jr. that are ready to step in right away. Once again, a lot of championship hopes, at least maybe finally.
If they can be 4-4 when they get Kareem Hunt in there, that could change everything for them.
We'll see what happens. And once again, still plenty of time left before September, so a lot of things can still happen in Cleveland. Once again, Mike giving them a C and Luke giving them a B. Going from Cleveland, we're going to go to Pittsburgh. And, of course, you already know a lot of offseason things with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You trade Antonio Brown to the Raiders. You trade
Le'Veon Bell.
Excuse me. Le'Veon Bell.
He didn't get traded.
Well, he's signed with the Jets, which is still an enigma in itself. But the question I want to ask you guys before we go into this is how much pressure or how much of this do you actually put on Ben Roethlisberger and the rebuild that they're going to have to do offensively alone?
Well,
excuse me.
I don't put any pressure. I'll just Ben just needs to stay out of the media and just start not knock on players and calling them out. Just do what Pittsburgh do. Keep everything in the locker room, and you just need that cleansing, and everything will be all right.
Luke, would you like to touch on it at all?
Have we touched into the draft grade yet or no?
No.
We're actually about to jump into that.
Oh, okay. I was like, hold on a second.
No, not a problem.
No, I mean, that's I'm not sure what's going on in that locker room right now. I do like the kid Connor, the James Conner kid at running back. He's more than serviceable. I think he proved last year. And Smith-Schuster, I think is I don't know if he's not a number one receiver, he's at least a 1A. So, I mean, we'll see what kind of help they can get him because I don't think he can necessarily, lead the way on his own like Antonio Brown could. But I think if Antonio Brown was Marvin Harrison, then Smith-Schuster would be like Richie Wayne. So he's got a ceiling there. I'm not sure if I would want him to be that lead guy, though.
All right, so once again, the Pittsburgh Steelers, a lot of interesting moves during their offseason. We're going to go into how they did in the draft. Starting with the 10th overall pick is who the Pittsburgh Steelers have first. Picking Devin Bush, a linebacker out of Michigan. Deontay Johnson, a wide receiver out of Toledo. Justin Lane, cornerback out of Michigan State. Benny Snell, running back out of Kentucky. Zach Gentry, who is a tight end from Michigan. Offensive linebacker. or outside linebacker, Sutton Smith out of Northern Illinois. Isaiah Buggs, a defensive tackle out of Alabama. Ulysses Gilbert, a linebacker from Akron. And Derwin Gray, an offensive tackle from Maryland. Mike, I'm going to shoot this one to you first. You gave the Steelers an A- overall. What gave you the sense of giving that grade?
Well, I would give him a solid A or A+ if they would have got more for Antonio Brown and the pick to the trade pick to the Raiders, or they would have got some for Le'Veon Brown. But I feel like I gave them A- because their defense, especially that middle linebacker spot, was getting killed. And losing Shazier Monday Night Football to a devastating injury, we saw more exposures of that. So they had to do something. They had to revamp. It was costly, give up the first round pick next year to the Denver Broncos, but it was worth it to them. And getting a player like Devin Bush, that he can do a lot of things. He's like a version of Ray Lewis 2.0, but in the black and gold. He could stop the run, rush the passer, and his coverage game is so ridiculously good, and that's what the Pittsburgh Steelers need. They missed that out of the linebacker spot, and getting him solidifies that defense right there. You just need need a few corners here and there. Plus, Joe Hayden's getting up there in age, and Marty Burns, we don't know if he's going to stay because he hasn't lived up to the hype. And wide receiver that they had out of Toledo, he's a good player, so that could go along with Washington, who they drafted last year, and Juju Smith-Schuster, who has earned the teammates' respect and was voted captain, so he'll step up to the plate. And one of my favorite drafts that they have was that Snell kid running back out of Kentucky. He kind of reminds me of John Connor, but John Connor's already here, so they can establish that 1-2 punch. He also has speed between the tackles as well. Overall, I just liked how the Pittsburgh Steelers went back to they started completely over the draft, trying to revamp that defense, and that linebacker is where they most needed at, and that's what they got in Devin Bush. Denver was right there to get him, but the Pittsburgh Steelers said, we'll give up everything to get him, and that's what they did. So that I give them an A- for it.
All right, Luke, you gave them, I actually went lower with them. You gave them a C. Why did you feel like they should have a C?
I don't think they should have traded up. I don't know that Devin Bush still would have been there at 20. This is a very defensive-heavy draft, though. And I think they gave up, Mike said they gave up a lot, and they did give a little too much, in my opinion, on that. And because, a lot of the speculation was that Denver was going to go quarterback in that area anyway. So now Devin Bush to the Broncos would have been a great pickup for them as well, especially them losing Shane Ray here, just a week or so ago, or over the last week. But the trade up on that just kind of, I do like the Benny Snell pickup though. That's going to be a great pickup. And this is basically one of those draft grades where 3, 5, 7 years from now, it'll probably be an A or a B, looking back on it. But like I said, I think they gave it too much to go. A couple of years ago, I mentioned the Chiefs earlier. They traded up to number 10 to get a franchise quarterback, and I don't know that trading. If you're going to trade up into a top 10 pick, I'm not sure that Devin Bush is going to be. He's going to be good. I don't know if he's going to be that guy though. So only time will tell.
So in other words, it's you don't know if it was necessarily worth that big of a sacrifice to.
I think they could have gotten I think they could have got something great at number 20.
All right.
And they would have had, some bonus draft picks, to work with as well that they gave up to Denver as well. So
Pittsburgh Steelers, once again, they, similar to the Cleveland Browns, have had an interesting offseason. A lot more gaining, though, than giving away for the Cleveland Browns compared to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Defense was definitely one of the big strong points going into the offseason. So I'm definitely interested to see how Pittsburgh does in 2019. And that's going to do it for the AFC North. When we come back, we're going to jump into the NFC North, and we're going to break down the teams in that division. And Mike and Luke will, of course, give you their grades on those draft picks as well. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. We are just now getting started. Gameball NFL Endzone. We'll return in a moment. happening, everyone? Welcome back to Gameball NFL Endzone, where the football season never ends. Now, in the second segment, we're going to jump into the NFC North, and starting with the Minnesota Vikings and their draft picks. They had the number 18 overall draft pick, and going down the line, starting with Garrett Bradbury, center out of North Carolina State. Irv Smith Jr., a tight end out of Alabama. Alexander Madison, running back out of Boise State. Drew Samia, offensive guard from Oklahoma. Cameron Smith, a linebacker from USC. Armon Watts, defensive tackle from Arkansas. Marcus Epps, I love the name Marcus. You know, maybe that's just me, so shout out to everybody named Marcus. But with a safety out of Wyoming. You have to bear with me on this one, but Ali Sameka, Udo, offensive tackle out of Elon. Chris Boyd, cornerback from Texas. Dylan Mitchell, a wide receiver from Oregon. Ola BC Johnson, wide receiver out of Colorado State. And Austin Cutting, long snapper from Air Force. So they actually had a pretty busy draft to see into Minnesota Vikings. Luke, I'm going to start with you. Both of you had similar grades. Luke, you had a B. Why'd you give the Vikings a high grade?
I think they just got the Bradbury kid's going to come in and contribute right away, and I think Irv Smith Jr. as well is going to contribute right away. There seems to be some indecision on whether Kyle Rudolph is going to be there come open the day for him or not. I guess we'll see. I mean, they could have a nice little 2 tight end set. If so, great. If not, I think Irv Smith can be at least the number 1 tight end for him. And Bradbury's kind of a plug-and-play guy. He's listed as a center. He can play guard. He can play tag. He's very versatile. Has great footwork, great lateral movement, high football IQ. He's basically a quarterback from the neck up. He was a no-brainer. He might be the best offensive lineman in the draft when it's all said and done.
All right, Mike, and you gave them just a slight higher grade of B+. Why did you give them a high grade?
Well, it comes down to it. Their offensive line was terrible last year, and you signed Kirk Cousins to that mega deal, and he didn't live up to expectations.
No, he didn't.
And the offensive line had one of the reasons why. If it was another quarterback, I would have gave him A because it was Kirk Cousins. He hasn't lived up to height yet, so I downgrade to a B+. And getting that Bradbury kid, when I watched him play, he is nasty. He is physical. He can finish runs. And also, he's a good pass protector. He's very good with calls, and he's very versatile. He can play guard, center, and the other guard, the positions where it needs to be played, it needs to be done. So, offensive line, that's the biggest need. Then you add Irv Smith Jr., the tight end out of Alabama. He's a good player, but he's not like a true tight end. He's more like a flex tight end to where you can spread him out wide. He can put him in the H-back position, wherever you want to call it. You can get some pass out of there. You get a block out of there. He'd be a good contributor there. So I don't know how would they utilize him there with Kyle Rudolph, the other tight end position. So we will see about that. Also getting a running back to go along with the running back you got now and Cook. And if he could stay healthy, I mean, they could be a 1-2 punch, and they'll dress them more on the offensive line side. And their defense is pretty stacked. Yes, they lost a player to the Browns, but they're still stacked. You still got Everson Griffin here. You got another player over there. You got Anthony Barr, who just re-signed to a mega deal, who was supposed to go to the Jets but backed out the last minute and came back. So overall, this was a pretty solid draft for the Vikings, and offensive line was their weakness, and so they solidified that. So I gave them a B.
All right.
On that.
B+ and a B from Mike and Luke, respectively, for the Minnesota Vikings. Once again, a very busy draft they had this year, but they definitely loaded up. And speaking of the Minnesota Vikings, we're going to go to their arch nemesis, the Green Bay Packers. We're going to start. They had the number 12 overall pick this year with Rashawn Gary, the defensive end from Michigan, followed by Darnell Savage, a safety from Maryland. Elgin Jenkins. Shout out Jenkins. Okay. We went from Marcus, now we got Jenkins. So shout out to everybody with the last name Jenkins. This is a good show so far. But a center and an offensive guard from Mississippi State. Jay Sternberger, a tight end from Texas A&M, followed by another Texas A&M. Kingsley Kiki, a defensive end. Kadar Hallman, a cornerback from Toledo. Dexter Williams, running back from Notre Dame. And Ty Summers, a linebacker out of TCU. Luke, we're going to start with you on this one. You gave the Green Bay Packers a B for this NFL draft.
Yeah, they had needs that they had to get filled here, and they were able to, I think, take a good step forward going forward with that. Basically, to highlight why to go back to the AFC note that we was doing here. I don't know that the Packers would have taken Devin Bush if he's still available there. So I'm just going to continue to defend them. More on that later. Anyway, no, they got a great pick out of Michigan there, and the Gary kid, and I actually in the later rounds, I think Dexter Williams, he's could be he's a nice little dual threat guy out of the backfield. He could do special teams for him as well. So they like I said, they had needs. It's kind of a wait and see approach. I'm optimistic with the guys they got though.
Mike, you actually gave them a lower grade on this one compared to Luke's B. You gave them a C minus. Why'd you give them a lower grade?
Well, I felt like that their needs was offensive. They need to help Aaron Rodgers get him some targets because Aaron Rodgers, ever since Jordy Nelson and Cook and them other players that they had gone to sign in other teams and released and to retire. And Aaron Rodgers doesn't have nobody to throw to really, except for Devontae Adams and Jimmy Graham. But Jimmy Graham hasn't showed up ever since they signed. So despite I'm not counting against the players because the players is good, but you need to help out Aaron Rodgers. I felt like they could have got Marquise Goodwin, who was right there in your arms, a good outside receiver, and a good tight end, and Noah Fant out of Iowa. You could have signed him. That could have been solidified right there. All of a sudden, Aaron Rodgers is like, hello, help me out here. I need some weapons. What are you going to do for me? And I feel like they left him in the dirt once again, the management up front. You paying him all this money. You putting a lot of pressure on him. And you could have solidified the offensive line spot as well. He just getting beat up and suffering injuries. And it's nothing against receivers, but they don't have the same receivers like they have. So I feel like they could have addressed the tight end spot as well as the receiver spot because you had Marquise Goodwin, a pure number one receiver who's the starting day one, and a pure one-tier tight end that they could have got in Noah Fant out of Iowa. So that's the reason why I'm knocking on that. And this year's draft was loaded on defensive side. They could have came back and got a defensive end or the safety, whatever. It was just defensive heavy, so I would have focused on that aspect more.
At what point are you suggesting they should have taken Noah Fant? With the number 12 pick or the number 21 pick? Because if I'm not mistaken, Denver took him at number 20.
The number 21 pick, or they could have traded up in front of Denver and got
See, that's what I'm saying. He was off the board at 21, though, if I'm not mistaken.
They could have did a lot of things with that, and Marquise Goodwin was right there at number 12. They could have selected him there, or they could have talked some with Denver, maybe get some more picks and trade up and get Noah Fant, the tight end out of Iowa. So they could have went that route.
They're obviously very high on Darnell Savage because, if I'm not mistaken, they had the number 30 pick and traded up with Seattle. Seattle was at number 21 initially, right?
Yeah.
They made a trade with the Seahawks to get the number 21. So going to be interesting to see what they do with the Savage kid there because they traded up 9 spots in the first round. That's a pretty hefty price to pay for to move up to get a safety out of Maryland. So, well, I mean, optimism abound for him, I guess.
And we was iterated. This year's draft class defense was so loaded. You could have got a lot of good players in the second and third round that fell who was projected to go in the first round. And if you wanted a pass rusher, that Polite kid was there in the second round where the Jets got him. It's just like a lot of good players was off the board. You could have addressed the more offensive line side, but because the players that they got, and they're good, I gave them C minus. But if it wasn't that case, I would have given them a lower grade. And the reason why I gave them C minus because they didn't help out Aaron Rodgers.
So basically, if you were to take the Packers draft and the Ravens draft, and you just switched them across straight up, you give them an A more or less.
Yes.
Because Baltimore with skill positions, they got your man Hollywood Brown, they got a few other cats in the later rounds there too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it would have been a higher grade, but just because they didn't do Aaron Rodgers no justice, they get a C minus.
All right, draft-wise, apparently Aaron Rodgers is looking over his State Farm policy and seeing what kind of insurance they can give him on the offensive end. I mean, there's still plenty of time for them to maybe go out and try to find some help for Aaron Rodgers. We'll see. But I definitely understand your point in regards to...
They got to get Jimmy Graham going.
Right.
They got to get Jimmy going.
All right. Green Bay Packers definitely went defense on this one more than anything. Once again, Mike, C-. Luke gives them a B. We're going to move on to the Bears, the Chicago Bears. Mike, I want to start with you. You gave them a B-. We're going to run down the list of those draft picks first before we let you elaborate on your grade of the B-. They had the 73rd pick overall in the draft, starting with David Montgomery, who was a running back out of Iowa State, Riley Ridley, a wide receiver out of Georgia, Duke Shelley, cornerback out of Kansas State, Kareth White, running back out of Florida Atlantic, and Steven Denmark, a cornerback out of Valdosta State. Mike, why did you give them a high grade of a B-?
Well, it could be because of even though you kind of say they have a first round pick in Khalil Mack, that kind of had something to do with what they trade and money spent. You have to say about that.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
And I would have gave them a higher grade if they would have maybe a second round pick or so, maybe a third round pick. It just maybe just my judgment or something like that.
Right.
I don't know. But they got a great value running back out of Iowa State, David Montgomery. I mean, he is a pounding machine. He is patient. He runs between the tackles. He may not have blazing speed, but he could do some things. He could hit you with a running game. He could hit you with a passing game. He's an overall good talent, and they had to replace Howard, who they traded to the Eagles for. So you got a steal there, and Riley Ridley, he was one of my favorite receivers coming out of the draft. I feel like he was more of a day 2 player and then a day 3, so they got a good deal out of that. What round did he go to again? Oh, yeah, he was a day 2, round 4. I forgot. I thought he was a round 3, but he was a day 2, like I was saying. They got a good pickup there. He's a purified route runner. And that's what you don't see more receivers nowadays because you see him stretch the field, run here, but he's a purified route runner. And they also got a good cornerback out of Kansas State who contribute to special teams and all that. And I give the Bears a B-, despite they really have a draft picks, but Khalil Mack solidified for that.
Absolutely. And look, we're in Sweden. See, you gave them a little bit of higher grade. Why did you feel like they deserved an A?
I mean, just thinking to the draft picks alone, Mike made a great point touch on Khalil Mack. That's that was technically their first round selection. Just like the Cowboys, drafted Amari Cooper in the first round and so on and so forth, right? Well, I mean, 1 year ago, David Montgomery, according to some draft experts, he was the number 1 running back going into last season's college football year. So for them to get him, in the third round there and still be waiting on him, that's a steal for him right there. And he mentioned Riley Ridley. I believe he's related to former Alabama receiver Calvin.
They're brothers.
They're brothers, right?
Yeah.
I knew there was a relation somehow or another. So that was a great pickup for him as well. And Duke Shelley, he will be basically he's kind of a secondary Swiss Army knife. He'll play the sidelines. He'll play the slot. He can go in motion, follow the receiver, and I believe Mike mentioned special teams as well.
And that's their second Kansas State player because one offensive lineman. Now they got one defensive lineman.
Got Cody Whitehair. Yep, Cody Whitehair a few years ago, which was a
second round.
Yeah, he was a second rounder, and probably to this day I still think if Seattle would have picked him as opposed to Jermaine Feedy with that number 30 pick in that draft, their offensive line would have never been in the shambles they were, and the Bears got a steal that year.
All right, so Chicago Bears, B- from Mike and an A from Luke. Overall, seem like they're continuing to climb up a course. Hopefully this will be something that'll elevate them from being a field goal away like they were in the playoffs.
Don't get me started on that one.
In the season.
Don't even mention that. Everybody, there's like...
Marcus, I don't think you was here, but I got the Bears in the Super Bowl this year. I got them in the Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
Really? I could actually see that too, to be honest with you. I can't wait to talk about that too, but that would be a great Super Bowl. That's a great offense against a fantastic defense. So
we'll have to see.
We will definitely have to see, but that could happen. All right, we're going to talk about the Detroit Lions, the last team in the NFC North. They had the 8th overall draft pick this year. T.J. Hawkinson, a tight end out of Iowa. Jelani Tavai, linebacker out of Hawaii. Will Harris, a safety from Boston College.
Attention library patrons.
Austin Bryant, a defensive end from Clemson. Amani Ariwari, a cornerback out of Penn State. Travis Fulgham, wide receiver out of Old Dominion. And Ty Johnson, running back out of Maryland. Isaac Nauda, tight end from Georgia. And P.J. Johnson, a defensive tackle from Arizona. In case you guys didn't hear that, I'll actually run back through that list. Starting with Will Harris, once again a safety from Boston College. Austin Bryant, a defensive end from Clemson. Amani Aruwari, cornerback from Penn State. Travis Fulgham, wide receiver from Old Dominion. Ty Johnson, a running back from Maryland. Isaac Nauta from Georgia. He's a tight end. And P.J. Johnson, a defensive tackle from the University of Arizona. Luke, I'm going to start with you. You gave the Lions a C.
Other than that first pick of theirs, Hawkinson with the number 8 pick of the draft there, nothing really jumps off the page for you there. Like, I get to listen to Gottlieb Show every once in a while from time to time. Doesn't matter what sport he's talking about. He makes the same point that rings true all the time. You got to have dudes. The Lions didn't get any dudes, okay? If you're a team and you have some dudes and you're playing someone that has more dudes than you do, you're going to lose. There's really nothing that jumps off the page for you there. I do think Hawkinson's going to shine for him, though. I think Stafford's got to be thrilled to have him to throw to, and he's also a great run blocking tight end as well. So you might be able to see Kerryon Johnson, his numbers might may increase as well running to his side. But outside of the Hawkinson pick, there just is a lot to be desired. It was a very typical line. Like Mike and I was talking about this, when we were doing the AFC and NFC East recaps. It's like we both give the Patriots an A. Now their draft's kind of never mind the Patriot name. Their draft class did pan out as an A, but it's the Patriots. Whoever they pick is going to be A. It's going to be A draft because it's Brady and Belichick. They know what they're doing. The Lions, it's the exact same thing for the exact opposite reason. It's the Detroit Lions draft. So it's almost hard to give them any more than a C or a B because it's the Lions.
It's almost like how you were saying. It almost reminds me of how the Knicks are in the NBA. I know it's a different sport, but it's just it just seems like they had
should
that
have heard
draft
Stephen A. Smith.
That was priceless. That was absolutely priceless. Mike, actually, you gave them just a tad bit lower. So, you're definitely obviously on board with Luke on this one. You gave them a C-. Why do you feel like they deserve a little bit lower?
If they didn't get Trey Flowers for the Patriots, I would have gave them an F, just to be honest with you. But I'll be nice, and I gave them a C-. Okay, you got a tight end, so what? You needed another defensive end to go along with Trey Flowers. That you could have got. Ed Oliver.
And they had to know that Ziggy Ansah wasn't going to be coming back either.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. You could have got Ed Oliver. You could have traded up and got Josh Allen, the outside linebacker from Kentucky.
Wilkins and Lawrence were still on the board out of Clemson.
Basically.
Only Cleveland Farrell was gone at that point.
And you also could have got one of my favorite players, Montez Sweat, who the Washington Redskins traded back the first round. Yeah, he was right there to go along with Trey Flowers because your defense needed help. Because that defense was horrible last year, even though they did beat some good teams, but still against the run, against the pass. And Trey Flowers, you paying all that money, he can't. They expect too much out of him already. That's what I'm seeing. You could have got Montez Sweat to go with Trey Flowers. That could have been a 1-2 combo right there. And you could also got an interior defensive tackle in the second round. Didn't worry about getting your tight ends because there was still some good tight ends in the second and third round. You could have got that Stenberger kid who went to the Packers. He was available in the third round. You also could have had another receiver to go along with that since you lost Golden Tate, if I'm not mistaken, to a trade last year, which they did. It doesn't jump out. It doesn't speak to me. And this is why the Lions, who they are, it's because of this in the front office. And I hate to say it, but if Matt Patricia doesn't pan out end of this year to early next year, bye-bye, coach.
Detroit Lions seem like they're not doing very much to right the ship, but I mean, the Detroit Lions have definitely been.
I'm not knocking on the player because he's a good player.
Right.
I'm just saying it's loaded with defensive talent, and they was still there. They could have got. They would have dressed the more. I would like to see them dress the more defensive side than the offensive side.
You kind of do you feel like they're kind of impatient, maybe with their draft selection?
I think they were. I think they were. I think they were. They just. I understand get Matt Stafford you players, but at the same time to compete with the Chicago Bear offense, the Green Bay Packers offense, and Aaron Rodgers, as well as the other team in that conference. Who I'm going blank. Who I'm missing out? The Vikings. I might whatever, but if you're going to compete with that, you got to address defense. And I feel like they didn't address defense on that part.
All right. That concludes the NFC East and, of course, this edition of Gameball NFL Draft.
Social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Gmail, all the above. You can follow us on that. Descriptions will be down below, as well as everything else. And I'm going to pass it on to you.
All right. Always, you can find me on social media, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Jovell Entertainment. That's Jovelle. Entertainment. Also be on the lookout. Coming to Topeka, Kansas, June the 23rd. We're going to shoot a video for my single Draped in Gold, so be on the lookout for that as well.
Find me on Facebook at Luke Hartnett. Find me on Twitter at Luke Hartnett2.
I'm Michael Riley.
I'm Marcus Young Genius Jenkins.
And I'm Luke Hartnett.
This is Gameball NFL Endzone, where the football season never ends. Peace. We are out, and see you next time.